And good morning, everybody. I'm John OLoughlin. Welcome to McDuff Lives. It's my channel. It's about my father, but more broadly, it's about the times, life and times that he lived through, and the life and times that we're living through, and trying to sort out, not only what happened to my dad, why did he die so young, but also what are the hidden factors that have been behind the scenes, not in his life, but in our lives. And everybody that lives on this planet has been, to one extent or another, controlled, had your lives tragically changed, had people taken from you that you love. People like my father just disappeared in a way from the scene because it's convenient to somebody to get rid of them. What the heck has gone on in our country during our lifetimes? That's what McDuff Lives is about. I want him to live through us so that we can expose the nightmare of hidden control, hidden levers that are changing our lives right and left. And one way that I thought to do that this morning was to take a look at the interesting life and career of House impeachment manager, the lead manager, who goes by the name of Jamie Raskin, Raskin. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the channel, and thanks, Andy, for doing all the great production work that you do for not just for here, but from Neighborhood News Studio generally. And a number of people are taking advantage of Andy's generosity with his production talent. So thanks again. And also a shout out to Jumping Mouse this morning, who made a really beautiful new meme for me. It's out on Facebook. Royal blue and yellow are the colors, and it's announcing the Monday night series that begins tonight with me, McDuff, and Garland Nixon, a tremendous journalist and reporter whose thoughts about the impeachment, if you haven't seen them yet, make sure and go to Garland Nixon's YouTube page and watch his little show on, it's a half hour, 40 minutes on the impeachment, and he just tears it up. I'm telling you, this is what lawyers are paid to do. He should have got the big bucks for the takedown that he did upon that impeachment. He wasn't even relying on the falsified evidence that is the subject of this interview with Trump's lawyer and the CBS reporter that I want to get. There's my calendar with Garland every Monday night coming out tonight at 8 p.m. So very exciting week coming up here. We're going to have Bill Taylor back tomorrow night at 8 p.m. The trio on Thursday. I will be reading more from the How the Nation Was Won book, and also from JFK versus Allen Dulles. Saturday night, wrapping up Population Control by Jim Marrs. That will be my last edition of that book. And Wednesday night, for our Wednesday book review, the 1 hour review that I do of every book on the book train, and the book this Wednesday is Seeds of Destruction by F. William Engdahl, a real tour de force of what has happened and is happening to our bodies through our food supply. Excuse me a second. To another, just a housekeeping note to those who signed up for memberships here on YouTube. Right before YouTube gave me a month cancellation, we are working on moving the various rewards and incentives and prizes away from the YouTube membership into a Screaming Ospreys membership. And we will absolutely be giving you the things that we promised you in that, even though YouTube is no longer allowing us to provide that through them. But that's fine. We're going to take care of it anyway. We will always honor our obligations at McDuff Lives. And screamingospreys.com, maintained by Jumping Mouse, our great Catherine, who also makes our memes and keeps our calendar tremendous in the hard work that she does. For what? For you. For not necessarily for me, not necessarily for herself, but for you as citizens of this country to benefit from what we can do. And as a team, I think we're getting very, very, very powerful. I'm serious about that. I think that we have a tremendous amount of power behind us now with Andy and Catherine, tremendous guests, not only the incredible George Webb, but also a number of tremendous contributors have joined us. And it's really going to be nice to have a weekly series with Garland to match off our Thursday trio series with George Webb and Professor Hamamoto. So I really think we're doing fabulous. We have ups and downs, especially when they take, like $1,000 away from me, like they did last time. YouTube, I don't like YouTube anymore. You guys are not being fair. You're not being right. You're not being just. So how can you expect me to stay? I think I've benefited as much as I can, because every time I get to a certain level, you knock me back down. Well, that's not good for our relationship. And plus, I want my money. So we have business to attend to with the gods at YouTube, and we'll see how high up on that pedestal they actually sit when we're done. Okay, so now we've had some really traumatic events going on lately. Nothing small, but huge stuff going on with these thugs that tried to insinuate themselves into the MAGA crowd, and these thugs that work for military intelligence, these thugs that work for the Proud Boys and the Antifas, and they switch their hats back and forth. They're mercenaries. They work for bucks. They don't work for freedom. They don't work for the government. They don't work for politics. They just work for money. I mean, how much would it cost for you to wear a silly, bull helmet, with fur all over it and horns, and go rushing, past the police into the well of the House of Representatives and take over the speaker's chair? How much would it cost for you to be paid to do that? I can't imagine doing anything as traumatic to the American people as doing that. But yet it wasn't just that person or those people with them with all the little cameras. It was the power behind it, and it had to have inside leadership in the form of somebody whose name might be Mitch McConnell. I'm not sure, but that might be the name. Or there might be somebody with the name of Pelosi involved. Maybe. Not sure. Just don't know. Don't know for sure. But I do know that the truth has been trampled upon even worse than the grounds of our people's house, even worse than the home of democracy, the capital of our republic. Even worse than imposing military occupation on Capitol Hill with real razor wire on top of the fences, like they were creating a prison camp or a internment camp or someplace that just doesn't reflect the values of the United States of America in any way. How can the American people sit by and watch their Congress be shut down with 11-foot fences and armed National Guard. How can we just sit and watch that happen? Well, we've been trained to just sit back and watch things happen. When I was in high school, they gave me a book to read, which I never read. It was called The Medium is the Message by Marshall McLuhan. And with such a mellifluous name, I couldn't forget the name of the book, but I never read it. And I couldn't understand the idea that the medium being the message, well, medium's just not the content. That's just how you deliver the content. I couldn't wrap my brain around it until recently when they told me what it really was the medium is the massage, not the message. It's the massage. Okay. You watch soap operas all day long. You watch things. You start to believe Walter Cronkite. You start to believe that when he says that's the way it is, that really is the way it is. And it's not. It's the medium massaging us. It's the massage of our minds into mush. Mush, Marshall McLuhan. So this is why, we can't trust the media, is because the media is intentionally giving us a bunch of mush. Just sit back and watch. Well, just sit back and watch the impeachment hearing, and let's take a look now. If you have that queued up, Andy, just part of the exchange between the CBS newswoman and the president's lawyer that made the rounds on Twitter over the weekend. I'd like to share at least a little bit of that towards the end. So yes, what is that lawyer's name? It's
you say of the tapes. Is that the doctored evidence of what you're speaking?
That's not enough for you? That's not enough for you?
Okay. So what she's saying is,
I'm not a juror in this trial. What I'm trying to be clear for our viewers is what you're referring to, because not everybody has been following.
It's not okay.
Not everybody,
to doctor
sir,
a little bit of evidence.
Respectfully, I have not said it is. I have not said it is okay.
Ma'am, your question is
I want to be clear for our viewers.
Listen, what has to happen
for our viewers about what exactly you're saying when you say doctored evidence.
The media has to start telling the right story in this country. The media is trying to divide this country. You are bloodthirsty for ratings. And as such, you're asking questions now that are already set up with a fact pattern. I can't believe you would ask me a question indicating that it's all right just to doctor a little bit of evidence. There's more stuff that we uncovered that they doctored, to be frank with you. And perhaps that will come out one day. But we won this case. And I'm not a sore loser, but what happened, or a sore winner, I should say, but what should happen is somebody should look at the conduct of these House managers. It's unconscionable.
Okay. I've given you the opportunity. I will remind you that what I said was that for our viewers who have not been following all of the hours of this trial, to be clear about what you are speaking about. And I understand
I'm speaking about the House managers' failure to prove their case. That's what I'm telling you. They weren't able to prove their case.
You have won the acquittal of your client.
Yes,
and if you'd like to continue to talk about this conversation, we can have that discussion.
I don't need to.
But for me to ask a question, to clarify for our viewers,
a slanted question that was set up to say it's okay for them to cheat. That was your question. Isn't it okay for them to cheat?
I didn't say that.
It's just a little bit. You said, to be fair, it was only a check on the Twitter. That's what you said. You got to live by your words. That's the problem. The media has to start living by the truth and not try to create a narrative.
Michael Vanderveen.
Yeah.
Thank you for joining us. I do appreciate.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. Michael Vanderveen is his name. And what he did was he spoke up for the importance of truth. And when she tried to minimize the admitted doctoring of evidence, he completely busted her on that. And this is what we have to do, is to force people to get to the truth. If you're in the media business, if you're not going to do that, then we've got to get rid of that, because this media control is the essence of it. As Alan Dulles has been cited as having really created the fact that there's no difference between the CIA and the media anymore. Is whatever the media says has been fed to them by the CIA. This is the Mockingbird media. And it's not just a few. It's not just Anderson Cooper. It is a whole stable full of people that have been trained up to lie when necessary. So now, here I am in Maryland. I'm represented in Congress by the majority leaders, Steny Hoyer, another one of those old guys that's been there forever. And the next jurisdiction over is Montgomery County. And who is the representative from Montgomery County? Well, his name is Jamie Raskin, Raskin. And Jamie Raskin is the lead attorney for the House managers. He's the man that was in charge of presenting the evidence for the impeachment. And there he is. Thank you, Andy. And I wanted to take a minute and try to figure out who he is and what influences have been upon him, because frankly, I never studied him, and I never really knew anything about him. I'd heard his name. That's about it. So what I wanted to do is to consider, what does it take to put somebody in a position that they will, in the most important hearing ever in the history of the U.S. Congress, I would argue, to falsify evidence, to put in evidence that wasn't already vetted to the point where you know that you can rely on it because you're an attorney and you know that you have this duty not to present false evidence, and even to actually make sure that something is not even just presented by mistake. Okay? Well, it took me some doing, but I found out that Jamie Raskin's real name is not Jamie, but Jamin, Jamin. And his middle name is Ben, Ben. And his last name is Raskin. And I didn't know where the name Raskin came from. So, kind of like we did with a number of characters, from Robert Swan Mueller to Burl E. Schultz, the father of George P. Schultz, and a number of other people. We've done some genealogical research. And his real name is Jamin, Ben Raskin. And that's the first time I realized that Benjamin is probably a combination of Ben and Jamin. What is his background? Well, let us look into his father, okay? Let's look into his father. His father's name is Raskin. What was his first name, Andy? I forgot which one it was. Marcus, that's it. Marcus Raskin. Okay, let's spend a minute on Marcus Raskin. Hang on a second. Very important man. One of the so-called famous Boston Five. Who were the Boston Five? The Boston Five was the five people who, now don't scroll so fast because I want to emphasize that there, Andy. Um, the Boston Five were people who authored a pamphlet against the Vietnam War, and in that pamphlet, they gave ways and advocated ways of avoiding the draft. You know, coming very close to saying be a draft dodger. Don't participate in the Vietnam War. So he and what was his name? Father Berrigan, I think. Oh no, I know who it was. It was the baby doctor, Dr. Spock. Benjamin Spock was one of these five, and a couple of other so-called activists. Okay. Now, Marcus Raskin was a very important man. He was a follower of Franklin D. Roosevelt. There you go, Andy. You've got these some of these guys, the draft card burners. Okay. Yeah. William Sloane Coffin. Yeah. These folks made themselves a name as leftists, as anti-war, as, you know, pro peace, love, and all of that stuff. But who are they really? Who are they really? Well, now let's go back to the Wikipedia, Andy, and I want to just emphasize some articles out of that. Okay. Marcus Goodman Raskin was an American social critic, political activist, author, and philosopher working for progressive social change in the United States. Okay, he's billed as a progressive, right? And they founded this thing called the Institute for Policy Studies in Washington, D.C. The Institute for Policy Studies, founded, I think, in 1963. Yes. Well, what else was going on in 63? Well, you know, obviously a lot of stuff that we've been reading about lately, including the murder of John F. Kennedy. The founding of the Institute for Policy Studies occurred after Marcus Goodman Raskin had interned with a couple of real insiders. And let's scroll forward, Andy, to let's stop right there. Born in Milwaukee, the second son of Russian Jewish immigrants. Okay, Russian Jewish immigrants. What do we know about Russian Jewish immigrants? That they're often refugees that have been given a leg up and turned into agents or sleeper agents of the British Secret Service. And I'm sorry, but we see this over and over again. So I have to be suspicious of Grandpa Benjamin Raskin and Anna Goodman Raskin. It's amazing that this boy was sent to Juilliard, apparently a prodigy on the piano, but then left and went to the University of Chicago, where he got both his bachelor's and his law degree. And instead of becoming a musician, he became a public servant, so to speak. Government service. He moved to Washington in 1958 and became legislative counsel to a group of liberal congressmen, including Robert Kastenmeier from Wisconsin, and more importantly, James Roosevelt from California, the oldest son of Franklin D. Roosevelt. Now, he also spent some time studying with Rexford Tugwell. And if you don't know about Rexford Tugwell yet, well, Mark Kulak over at Housatonic Live will give you the lowdown on Tugwell. But Tugwell was one of those people on the somewhat, it looks like the left, okay? But they are working in the FDR administration, and the suspiciousness of what their relationship with the Soviets has come into our studies many times. I don't want to go off on Rexford Tugwell right now, except for, you can say Columbia University. You can say the founder of Greenbelt, Maryland, where George and I spent some days investigating up there. Governor of Puerto Rico during World War II. All right. Well, Rexford Tugwell, he's a story all on his own. And let's get back to Marcus Raskin. Might take a second to say Raskin is a name I've tried to sort out. Where does that come from? There doesn't seem to be a tradition of a Raskin name in Russia. So maybe it was a name that was made up or adopted somehow during the immigration process of Grandpa Benjamin, the plumber. So Raskin, I've learned otherwise, is not really a surname at all. It is a nickname in the Yiddish language for the female named Rachel. So perhaps it was somebody's mother was named Rachel, and they just said, well, we'll call you Raskin. I don't know. I'm speculating. But it's not a natural name that I can sort out of any part of Russia. But interestingly, a novelist wrote a novel called The Raskin Family. And this novel, which I haven't seen or read, but I just learned about it this morning in my research, is all about a family that grew up in White Russia, in Byelorussia, in Minsk. And it's all about the family relationships of these Jewish Raskins. Is that story a part of a greater story to try to build a legend for our current Raskin family, the Jamie Raskin family, and other Raskins that descend from them? Or did I just miss it? It really is a Raskin family from Minsk. I just haven't found it in my research. But see, this is the kind of work that pays off, because when we can see that there's some kind of crazy relationship between these immigrants, and there's no history that we can really go through to say, oh, okay, these people came from Minsk and they were the grandfather and the great-grandfather, and go back. You can't get past this one statement that says that his parents were Russian Jewish immigrants. So suspicious. Now, Institute for Policy Studies, how did that come about? Well, he's working for the two congressmen, Kastenmeier and Roosevelt. I wish I could scroll it myself. Sorry, Andy. Let's see. Okay, stop there for a second. Yes, they were working. He was working for McGeorge Bundy. Okay, McGeorge Bundy is the guy in the State Department that is messing with that is running, the conversion of JFK's wind down the war policy into the CIA LBJ policy of build up the Vietnam War. He's the bad guy that is transforming Kennedy's intentions of withdrawing from Vietnam into Johnson's expansion of the war, just as Kennedy is killed. And so McGeorge Bundy is a skull and bones guy, and not to be trusted by those of us that want to see get our republic back. As simple as that. These Bundys, okay? Skull and bones. You know, they don't have a skull and bones on their thing for no reason. Okay, it's all about doing whatever's necessary, including murder. Sorry. The sorry about that. My phone dinged. So there you go. He's working for McGeorge Bundy, and suddenly our Marcus Raskin gets a conscience. He says, "Wait a minute! Look at this foreign policy we're doing in Vietnam. It's awful. We're imposing our imperial will on these foreigners. That really, how can we do this? It's unconscionable." And from there, he becomes a member of the Boston Five. Okay, so why did he suddenly develop a conscience and take the opposite position of the insider McGeorge Bundy? Was it because of suddenly he realized that the people of Vietnam are being subjected to horrible torture, genocide, destruction of their culture by McGeorge Bundy? Or was he perhaps used as a servitor to be a false leader of the left? And what is the evidence that I have for that? Well, the evidence I have for that is that the Institute for Policy Studies was where he went when he left the State Department, supposedly creating this thing to criticize American foreign policy. But who founded the Institute for Policy Studies? Well, he did. Could you go back, please, to the Marcus? Andy, could you go back to the Marcus Raskin Wikipedia page, please? What I'm trying to there now, when it's go to where it said Institute for Policy Studies. Okay, there you go. All right, now just leave it there for a second while I work through this. 1963, Raskin left government service. This is Jamie Raskin's father, okay? And with Richard Barnett, a State Department official in the Arms Control and Disarmament Agency, created an independent institution outside of government to critique official policy. Much of his work focused on the Vietnam War. They co-authored this Vietnam Reader, which then turns into a cause célèbre, and he gets prosecuted. But fortunately, William Sloane Coffin, Benjamin Spock, Michael Ferber, Mitchell Goodman, and our hero got acquitted. Then he writes a critique of what he calls the national security state. And that's what we call it today, the national security state. He coined that term. Next, he advocates social reconstruction. And in this New Left literary journal, he says he foresees a peaceful process of non-Marxist reconstruction that will replace authoritarianism and the status quo with politics of the people and a redefined social ethic. The heck does that mean? That means that they're going to reshape society, you know, they're going to make it into a better, right? Well, this is the Fabians. This is the people that think that, you know, humanity as a whole is a mess, but we can improve it by getting rid of the bad genes and growing more of the good genes, as we've been over many times in studying the crazy Nazis. And then, you know, he becomes a member of the anti-nuclear movement. But who financed? And let's go, if you would, to the Institute for Policy Studies actual Wikipedia page And we'll see on there who actually financed it. The person that really was behind this Institute for Policy Studies, this counterweight to the State Department's national security state, was financed by, and let's get down to it, where is it? All right, I'm just going to go ahead and tell you that it was financed by Paul Warburg. Paul Warburg of the Warburg family, okay? The same people, that have been working with the elite banks ever since, 1900. So when we find out that this institute itself is financed by James Warburg, sorry, I said Paul, and most of the money came from a foundation of Samuel Rubin. Well, this is, Warburg family is the father of the Federal Reserve System, okay? Well, what more can I say? These people are the enemy of our republic in that they are running our government through the banking system as opposed through our political system. As simple as that. So James Warburg, the son of Paul Warburg and the father of the Federal Reserve System. This is the Hegelian dialect, okay? It's the national security state is the bad guys, but Institute for Policy Studies is the good guys. And we are going to protest against the Vietnam War, even if we get prosecuted, because we are the good guys. And so they co-opted the left, they co-opted the right, and everybody else is driven into, you have to follow one or the other. It's just like red and blue politics today. Now, let's move on to our tragedy that I wanted to talk about this morning, and that is the death of Tommy Raskin, okay? And perhaps Andy has a obituary or a notice of the death of Tommy Raskin, which happened just in December of this year. And in December of this year, as Jamie Raskin was being chosen to lead the charge against President Trump, he suffered a terrible family tragedy. His son, Tommy, committed suicide. And I didn't know that until I looked it up, but he mentioned his son's suicide in his his closing argument at the at the impeachment hearing in the Senate as House manager. Why did his son die? Well, I don't think we're ever going to know, but the son did do some publishing in a journal that I think it was called Good Men's Journal, and it indicates maybe he might have had a sexual orientation that was objectionable to some people. He was really an animal rights person. He was very much in favor of the rights of animals, and I agree with him. I think we treat animals horrifically, and think about, whenever I think about Indonesia now, I think about the poor orangutans whose habitat is just being decimated by these great big yellow machines all the time. Just nothing the orangutans can do to fight back against the huge machines. And well, Okay, so they announced the Tommy Raskin Memorial Fund for People and Animals, and that's great. And they said a lot of nice things about their son, but we don't really know in what manner he committed suicide. We're told he committed suicide, and that he had been depressed for a long time. And I am sorry, and my condolences to all the Raskins for such a terrible loss. But here's my question. How could Jamie Raskin, within 2 weeks of the suicide of his only son, still be burdened with the duty of carrying forward this fake impeachment process? And is that because he is, like his father, a servitor, someone whose life has already been predetermined to be in service of the empire? Exactly the kind of thing that they probably would have done to me if my dad hadn't, met his early demise. The kind of things that they do to psychologically affect other people. Now, was Jamie Raskin, Representative, Maryland 8th, in his full possession of his emotions and his thinking powers when he was forced into that position? Why couldn't they get somebody else to do it? He apparently didn't have a choice, it appears to me. And so when he came out with, all his guns blazing, and he did this, he totally trashed the Trump, and he was just terrific according to all the press, all the Mockingbird press says he did a great, great job. But just like, the eulogy for Tommy, he was a great kid. He loved everybody. He was a wonderful person, and I'm sure he was. And he, and Jamie did a wonderful, great job of, presenting no evidence as if it were evidence. But then, they did cross a line. According to the president's lawyer in that interview, seems to be quite apparent that the House managers do need to be examined. And so I suggest that, yes, do a little bit more than I can do in a few hours of research this morning. Do a deep dive on these House managers. Find out what's the real motivation behind them. I suspect that you'll find that there's a whole tradition of him and his family, from the time they came from Russia, wherever in Russia, to be made into servitors. Why else would you compromise your morality in service of in the context of serving as the representative of your district in the most important hearing of your career? Now, it reminds me also of another incident of a famous politician whose son died just before he took up a major political challenge. And now I'm talking about Beau Biden. Who was Beau Biden? Well, he was also a lawyer, a politician, and somebody that worked for DuPont, for the DuPont family that is the prominent, almost the owners of Delaware, okay, to be blunt. And how I asked the same question about President Biden is, why did he decide to go forward with his political career, and jump right into a run for the presidency immediately after his son, Beau Biden, died? a terrible death of brain cancer. Why? Why, Joe? Why don't you just take a year off and mourn? What is wrong with people taking some time to mourn the loss of a son? Well, I don't think Joe Biden had a choice. See, I think this is the same type of dynamics going on here, where I don't know. I don't know if it's possible for them to give somebody brain cancer, or whether they have the ability to, who knows? Who knows what they can do with their sophisticated technology, their microwave guns developed, way back in the 60s and 70s. And at what point now can they, induce cancer by whatever means? We don't know. But if you lose your son and you still are, engaged in politics immediately afterward, it just doesn't ring true to me. It doesn't make sense unless you have been compromised. And I do think that the whole Biden family is compromised. And I do think that, it's very likely that the Raskin family is also run into this type of force behind the scenes that is going to control your life. And once you get into a certain level, then you can't get out. Things are lined up of a blackmail thing sort of nature that, unless you want to risk losing a child, you go along with what they say. Maybe Jamie Raskin didn't want to present, evidence, present tainted evidence. Maybe he, as a lawyer, knew that he really didn't have a case, because he didn't have a case. Anybody that thinks that he had a case can just watch Garland Nixon's show from this weekend, or Friday, I think it was, where he spelled it out. He said, look at the indictment, look at every element of the indictment, find the proof that goes behind it, and you can't, because there isn't any. They did not prove their case. So maybe Biden wanted to retire and he didn't, do what they said, and so something bad happens to his family. Maybe Jamie Raskin didn't want to play the role of, the prosecutor of President Trump over trumped up charges. But, they have ways of convincing you to do what they want you to do. Jamin is not a name you very often run into. If you just Google Jamie Raskin, it's not likely you'll see a connection to his father. But one of the things that his father did was wrote about the importance of truth, and how our media and our government have got to get back to telling the truth. And I don't have it at hand, but I was looking at, his own writing. This is Jamie Raskin's father emphasizing how important it is for our government officials to tell the truth. Okay, so maybe they didn't want us to recognize that his father was this important guy, Marcus Raskin, the Institute for Policy, policy coordination, whatever it was, this thing that was made up by the Rexford Tugwell, McGeorge Bundy, fake left wing, in order to control the dialogue and lead us against our will by the techniques of the Hegelian dialectic. Oh, there we go. Marcus Raskin, Democracy and Its There's the quote. Thank you, Andy. Brilliant. You found it. Let me just read this, and let's wrap up the show with this quote, because I think it's absolutely great. Democracy and its operative principle, the rule of law, require a ground on which to stand. That ground is the truth. When the government lies or is structured like our national security state to promote lies and self-deception, then our official structures have broken faith with the essential precondition for constitutional government in democracy. Ipse dixit, Marcus Raskin. So let's get back to the truth. Ye shall know the truth, and the truth shall set you free. Have a good afternoon, and make sure and tune in tonight for our first show of our new monthly series, McDuff and Nixon with Garland Nixon, 8 p.m. tonight. And stay tuned for Belton Road. Biden's Belton Road is the name of the channel on YouTube where you can follow George Webb coming up in just 3 minutes at noon. Thanks, everyone.